But it's interesting that you say that kind of set the basis for the production work that you're doing now. So if we fast forward a little bit now to last record, Attention. And you have done production work for the band before, but when was it decided that you were going to take this kind of project?
I think it was thrown around when we were doing the demos because as Brent and I are writing, I'll produce the demos for at the same time. And a lot of the demo stuff that I've recorded in the past has ended up on the records just in a different form. Like a lot of the vocal performances and off of Amaryllis, like I'll Follow You. That whole vocal performance was recorded on the demo.
Okay.
The piano was recorded on the demo. Okay. So a lot of that stuff actually ends up making the record. But this particular record was we were writing something special, and I think we knew that it was something that was near and dear to all of us, and it was very personal. And I think that it at some point, Brent looked at me on a few occasions and mentioned, what do you think about producing the record? And I think it's a stupid idea, because a great producer is the outside opinion for the band, and they bring that outside ear in, and they try to keep you from making mistakes, and I've always thought that that's not always the case. There have been some really great self-produced records, like Weezer produced Pinkerton, right? I think that's a great record. It was self-produced. But then one of my favorite bands for a long time was Muse. The minute they started self-producing, they lost me. I would say they turned into a spaceship and flew away. And that's just my opinion. I always loved all the raw stuff that they did. When they had other producers working with them, so Rich Costi and guys like that. So I've always kind of been a little fearful of that. But then, we actually had a serious conversation about it, and Steve Robertson, who's our A&R representative at Atlantic Records, talked to me about it as well. And he and I had one serious conversation about it, and I said, yeah, I think I can do it. I think I know what the scope is of this record. I think I know what the record wants to be. I think I know the pulse and the heartbeat of it, and it's so, I have a vision for it, and I think that I would rather go crazy myself making it than go crazy trying to tell someone else how to make it, and so it actually, man, to be honest with you, it was, I never had any manic moments or anything of not thinking I was going to be able to pull something off. There were songs that were more difficult and songs that had to be figured out and pieces that had to be put in place, but there was never any, I never had my head in my hands going, what have I done or anything like that. I think that we all just, it goes back to having a knowing. I think the whole time I had a knowing and the band had a knowing, and that we were making something really cool and it sounded different, and it was really a lot of fun. And we brought in our good friend Doug McKean to help me engineer the record, and Doug had engineered Sound of Madness and Amaryllis, as well as Green Day's American Idiot and My Chemical Romance's Black Parade. So he's very, very competent, and he's a lot of fun. And for me, he was kind of my checkpoint in a way, because I could look at him. He's very, very successful and very good at what he does, and I could look at him and go, am I going too far with this, or is that a stupid idea, or is this a great idea, have we recorded too many guitar tracks, like that kind of thing. And so he was sort of my safety net for a lot of it, and he was there through a good bit of the tracking. Like I said, a lot of the vocal tracking on this record was done in the demo process, but as far as the instrumentation goes and the arrangements, because even if you have things already recorded, you can still be rearranging things. Even if the vocals are already there, you can rearrange music around the vocals and do other things with it. So it was nice to have him there for that. But yeah, I think that I think all in all, man, it was a good decision. Now that we can listen back to it, I think that we made a record that's very tangible, that people can identify with and hold on to and love. And that's really the point. That's the whole purpose. So I don't think we turned into a spaceship and flew away.
Now, what I find, because I've listened to the album a bunch of times, and what I find is, you mentioned being close to this album. It's a very personal record for the band, and I can imagine that you want to control then how it's going to sound. So and I do think you. It sounds very cohesive because of that, because of your connection to it and kind of the situation around it. But one thing that I read about this process is it fair to say that you went in it quite obsessively, but barely taking the day off producing?
Well, I didn't take any days off. There were no days. I think I maybe had. I mean, thinking back about it, we actually recorded some of the drums in Los Angeles in August, I believe, of 2017. Just a few, because Zach and Brent were actually going to do some more writing for the record. And I think in that writing they wrote Evolve and Special, I think, was written during that time. So Barry and I kind of had nothing to do. One thing we do in our band is we'll write together. Brent and I'll write together, Zach and Brent and I'll write together until we reach a certain point. And then it's like, do we have what we need? Well, I think there's still something there. We need someone else to get it out of us. So we'll go write with other writers. But you never want to have too many cooks in the kitchen, So we don't ever walk in there with like 4 of us and another writer or anything like that. It's just a couple of us and another writer, So, and I think that's very healthy. It's one of the things that really helps the sound of our band is having the different flavors, and nobody gets uptight about who wrote what, once the writing's done. So like I said, Zach and Brent and a guy named Scott Stevens initially wrote Special, and I came in and wrote some parts for it when we were in the production. So, but Evolve, that's Zach and Scott and Brent, So, and there's songs on the record that are just me and Brent. There's songs that are myself, Brent, and a guy named Dave Bassett, who we've written with before.
Sure.
So it's a lot of flavor, man. It's a really, really good thing. But anyway, I digress. Back to the story. So they were going to write, and we were already in California, and we were going to have a week off before we went back on tour, And it was like, I just looked at Barry. I'm like, why don't we? Some of the things that we have done, why don't we go ahead and just track some drums? So we started that in August, and then September 18th of 2017, we all picked up in Charleston at my studio, and that's where we stayed for the duration. So we had a few songs, the drums were done in Los Angeles, but everything else was done in Charleston. And from September 18th until January 22nd, I didn't take any days off.
Okay.
But I was never like really tired. I was excited. It was never mundane. I think, and I was never really stressed out until the mixing part of the process, because I was initially not going to mix the record. We had someone else who was going to mix it, and I made the trip out to California to start the mixing, and sat in the room with this gentleman who's very accomplished and an amazing person and actually a good friend for 5 days, and it wasn't happening. It wasn't coming together, and so we had to fire him from the project, which is a little weird, but and then it was like, we got to find someone to mix this, and a bunch of names came up at that point, and then I remember Brent called me. I was actually in California still, and I was driving down Canaan Road. I remember it very vividly, and he calls me and he's like, "So I was talking to Steve, from A&R rep, and he's like, I think you need to mix the record." That's the last thing I wanted to do. I didn't. Once again, you've recorded the demo, you've written the song, you've recorded the demo, you've mixed the demo. Then you come in and you engineer a lot of and record and produce the song, instrumentation and everything. Played a lot of the instruments on it, and then now you have to have the outside perspective to mix it as well. And I was exhausted at that point. I didn't want to mix it, and that's really where the only stress came in was. Because the first few mixes out of the gate, weren't great. And I think I was just kind of putting pressure on myself. So I think I mixed the song Attention 5 times, and none of it was good. I mean, it was okay, but it wasn't great, And so then I was like, well, move on to something else. And a little bit of technical stuff here, but for some reason, man, I was just having trouble with these mixes. And I remembered an article I read years ago with Andy Wallace. And he said that on his master bus compressor, he doesn't ever mind hitting like -8 dB, which is a lot, you know, for a master bus. I mean, that's a lot of compression. And I've never done that. I've always liked to let things breathe, you know, so I'm like barely hitting -4, you know, on like a G series SSL compressor or something. And I was like, screw it. I just ticked it up, man, and this Creatures was the first was what I was working on. And all of a sudden, man, it was like, wow, this sounds really good, you know? And I didn't really tweak my mix too much. I just compressed it a little more and let it, you know, coalesce a little more. And you know, and from then on, man, I hit the ground running, and I really just kind of ticked them off like this, you know, one every couple of days until I got to Black Soul. Black Soul was the last one I mixed, and it went kicking and screaming. It was not gonna. It didn't want to happen, but it did. It finally worked. So yeah, that was the only time I was really stressed out. But I didn't take any. I worked Christmas Day. I worked New Year's Day. There was no, you know, there was just. Once I'm very obsessive about things. So once I'm in, I can't relax until something's done. You know.
Well, that's a very interesting point, because making it exactly the way you hear it in your mind must be impossible almost. It's
to an extent, but you know, I have to say, man, it's a very, very rare thing when something that you hear in your mind's ear turns out the way that you wanted it to. And I have to say, man, there's to have a record that I'm this close to. There's one or two things. Like normally, you listen back to something you worked on, you're like, I don't like that, but you know, you learn to accept certain things that you don't like. And with this record, I think just because of the nature of it, because you know, there was no price tag on it in a lot of ways because we were doing the work. So I didn't have to worry about, you know, going overtime or, you know, paying this mixer to recall this, to tweak that, to do this or that, the other thing. It was all in my hands and in our hands. Anything that bugged you there's no excuses.
Right.
Fix it, you know. But you don't want to get perfect, you know. I was watching, you know what Masterclass is? Have you seen Masterclass? Sure. Yeah. So I was watching Malcolm Gladwell, who's an author. I was watching his Masterclass, and he brought up this quote by Voltaire, which is, "The perfect is the enemy of the good." You know, and I love that. And that's what I mean. It's like you don't want to suck all the life out of anything's perfect. Nothing. I love that about our record is that you know, we didn't copy and paste guitars and bass, and it's like we played it all the way through. You know, it lives and breathes. You know, it's got its thing. But as far as if something really bugged me, you know, there's no reason not to fix it. And there's only one thing on this record that bugs me, and that's it. And it's not enough for me to dislike the record. So
that's good.
So you know, I really can't. Yeah, you know, we're very, very fortunate that beginning to end, this is a really great record. And there's, you know, and another thing about producing, you talk about, you know, being too close to it or you know, not being able to have an outside opinion. We actually had a bunch of interludes and other pieces of music that kind of threaded the record together and went from one point to the next point, and that it was gonna sound like more of a story record or a concept record than it is now. And we had the intro and the outro, which is on the record, and then all these other things that threaded this one song into the next song and this song into this song. And when we got the first master copy of it, I just listened back to it. I'm like, this is too much, you know. So I have all this awesome recorded stuff that we just removed. It was because it made it a more conceptual, but it wasn't as great a rock record, you know, with all this stuff going on. It was almost a little too self-serving. It was too much, you know. It was over the top. So we pulled all of that stuff out, or I did. I was like, just get rid of it, you know, and just go this song to this song to this song to this song, and it worked out really well.
Yeah, I was going to say, because in that sense it fits in a way the subject matter in where you don't want it to be perfect. You want it to be that raw, that emotive.
Yeah.